would not. So I was frankly fairly surprised that we saw the level of pull through with our wine club on one-off e-commerce offers.
Very interesting, fascinating. Jenny, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, we, like Matt, we differentiate promos between the wine club and the general public. For the general public, we certainly do try to encourage wine club signups, promoting the access they have to certain wines. And then our wine club members, I frankly was surprised with how well they received the special offers. And where we have kind of fought any discounting, we finally started discounting shipping costs, and that was one battle that I lost, and because I was afraid that people then expected, the Amazon factor of free shipping, which is still, which was a huge cost to us. But we did it, and club members liked it, and really came through for us. And like Matt, our wine club signups really flatlined during the tasting room shutdowns. We did get a few more via signups via the website, but pretty much we flatlined on new wine club signups during the shutdowns.
Great, interesting. So you guys did decide to go the free shipping model, because expectations have been set by Amazon.
Well, we never went free shipping, but they were significantly reduced.
Discounted shipping.
I think the lowest we ever went, for a $5 on a case, which is, to me, is essentially giving it away. But we did it for very brief periods of time. We tried, and then would extend it accordingly, or kind of ease back into recouping some of those costs. But I have to say, we ended up, the year the e-commerce really did save us and kept us slightly over 2019 at the end of the year. So we were very pleased.
Wow, that's great. That's great to hear.
We certainly want to retain those people.
Yeah. And when you say e-commerce, so you mentioned briefly some of the other e-tail opportunities, Jenny. So do you do a lot of business through, say, like a Wine Access or a wine.com that have, essentially their own platform? And what you think is the advantage, there versus, say, your own platform that, you're selling directly from the winery?
I look at those like for Wine Access, for example, it's just sort of an intermittent thing. We might do 1 or 2 offerings a year. And again, I've always am keen to not compete with our distributors, especially this year, trying to keep our distributors in business. So we do that just periodically for certain wines, maybe some media darling wines that we can put out there in a limited way. But I see it as a fairly positive thing, and so I think it certainly became a critical outlet for us last year as part of our whole direct to consumer sales, certainly.
Have you seen customers say, come from those e-tail sites to your site directly?
Yeah, we have. I don't have an exact number, but we do get people that contact us afterwards. They were so pleased with it. They'll go to the website. They'll sign up. We have had that. Not in a large degree, but we have. And as I say, and then we did do an awful lot of virtual tastings last year, with our partners.
Sure. So with your e-tail partners, are you saying, or just with your own customers?
It was a variety. I think the big surprise for us was the business world, corporate America, reaching out to spend dollars that they're not spending on travel and entertainment, setting up virtual tastings with sales and with packages. We were approached by various customers, trade wine bars, retailers, to do tastings with them. I think everybody was, throwing out lots of ideas and trying lots of things. And basically, Dick and I said yes to everything.
So you got to see all of it. And then those worked out to be pretty large sales vehicles, correct? Because
they were nice. Especially the private enterprise business America coming to us, especially in the fall, with some virtual tastings and selling packages through there. I saw that as particularly advantageous because we were reaching customers that weren't necessarily customers prior to them. So that was particularly valuable to us, just to get those people signed up on our mailing list, some signed up as club members, or just outright purchases direct from the winery.
Sure. Now that's the virtual tastings have become kind of an interesting byproduct of this. It's amazing to see that we can reach so many people, and that so many people are interested in buying a bunch of wine to taste with folks. It's a fascinating thing. I'm always surprised at Albertsons that people will really go and invest $150 on a night at home, I guess, and open up a bunch of wines. I hope they have a Coravon. Matt, do you do some virtual tastings too, or?
Yeah, we have. We've been doing probably on average about one a month, and that's something we've really tried to cultivate. I think, these departments have a budget for the year, for better or for worse, and it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. And so we try to capitalize on them needing to use it before they lose it. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a great and totally unexpected addition to our winery direct sales. They're fairly large, generally probably 30 participants, and so it's a decent drop of wine. It's a good opportunity for us to be hands-on and face-to-face as much as possible with people in this kind of format, and we have a lot of fun with it. Winemaker Dieter, who I know Adam knows, he's he's pretty good with people, and it turns into a little bit of the Dieter comedy show. And so it's, it's fun for us. It's kind of like a little stress relief valve in a way, and nice to just be able to get in front of people again, and have some communication, show the wines, and, maybe turn some people on to a winery that maybe they didn't know about otherwise.
Sure. Do you do that through like a Zoom or a Teams meeting, and then you send it out, and then how far in advance do you get the customers the wine, or at least start advertising those?
Yeah, we usually work through whatever company is has reached out to us or that we've coordinated with, and so we'll send the wines out so they arrive maybe a week in advance, so they have time to settle down from shipping, and we'll do the tasting on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform the company wants to use. It's typically Zoom. And then we usually tie an offer into that tasting. So a bundle of either the same wines or an expanded bundle with, either free or flat rate shipping, depending on where they're located.
Fascinating. And Jenny, you're hosting some of your own virtual tastings, right? So you set up the Zoom meetings and ship out the wines and set up the offers and all the pieces involved with a virtual tasting?
Well, there's different levels. So for our wine club, instead of the old pickup parties, we started doing virtual tasting with Dick and Bill, and we schedule it. And those were Zoom, and we schedule them a couple weeks after the club member gets their shipment, and people sign up for the tasting, and most open their bottles and taste along with Dick and Bill. which is a lot of fun. But we started, because these corporate virtual tasting offers kept falling in our lap starting in the fall, we started promoting them in the holidays, and we had a great response, and in fact we're still doing them. So we've got a tasting room person for smaller groups that does them, and we'll host them. Larger groups, Dick and I will get special requests, and we'll do those as well. So that was something that was a complete surprise to us in those outlets. And as I said before, I'm particularly excited for those because we get to introduce our wines to the public that may not have even heard of Foxen before.
Sure. No, that's great. So I guess, we've talked about a lot of different pieces of e-com and marketing and how that all fits together. What do you think, and I'll start this question with you, Jenny, how do we keep this momentum going, right? When people turn back to, the life, I guess, post-COVID, say, and, we're all vaccinated and there's, herd immunity, how are we going to keep this e-com situation going? Because it seems like for both you and Matt, it's been a pretty positive way for the winery to keep the bottle still flowing out of the winery.
Oh gosh, that's such a great question, and it's something that I think late at night on how we can keep this going. And I tend to be a pretty stubborn optimist, so I think there's going to be a percentage, especially in the demographics on the older age group, which Matt is not a part of, but certainly my age up to Dick's age. People that were less inclined to go e-commerce are now going e-commerce. So we're hoping that now they know how to push the right buttons. They'll continue to do that. But I think we'll continue with virtual tastings with special offers. And we'll try to keep some of that, if not all of that, momentum going. And well, hopefully that will happen at the same time that the restaurant business, our distributor side, which still, makes up, pre-pandemic, it made up 35% of our business. So we're hoping that will, it's already recovering a bit. Some markets better than others, but on the social media side, I think we've learned a lot this year in trying different things and seeing what works, and I'd like to continue that.
Great. Well, when the on-premise returns, remember us retailers here too. Don't send all of our allocations to save a little bit for me.
I have to tell you that on the distributor side, we that metric certainly was upended on terms of on versus off premise, and I would not be, we would not be where we were by the end of the year had it not been for retailers.
Sure. No, I obviously,
yeah.
we're all interested in where that goes, and we've been able to, as a retailer, sell a lot of really beautiful wines, and we want our on-premise folks to recover as quickly as possible. Yeah. At the same time, I'm going to be sad when some of my allocations get cut way back.
I've been doing this now for over 35 years, and I'm still convinced that relationships are everything. And I was fully aware when we were making wines that we weren't normally or historically making available to retailers. I don't plan on taking those away. I see that as counterproductive.
Sure. Oh, yeah. That's great. Matt, it's kind of a similar question to you. It seems like you've been very successful in the e-commerce side of this. How do you keep it going into the new world of post-COVID, and how, will that supplement kind of other things that you do?
Yeah, I expect to see a drop off in our winery direct sales once people are comfortable traveling again. I think it's just, and that's okay, because that means they'll be traveling. Maybe they're coming here instead of ordering and us shipping to them, which I'd rather have anyway. But I think what we realized early on is that we weren't consistently and clearly communicating with our customers via email. And this, pandemic has had a bunch of silver linings for us. And I think one of them was that we realized we needed to get back to the basic blocking and tackling, meaning best practices when it comes to communicating with our customers. And so we're going to continue doing that. We're going to stay consistent with our email messaging, our offers, and try to come up with compelling things that maybe they wouldn't have access to, they being our customers, if they came to the tasting room. So a reason and impetus for them to continue buying through our website. So that'll be kind of the main focus for us, is just staying consistent.
Great. Do you think both of you are, well, I guess I'll start with Jenny. Do you think you're going to continue doing some of those virtual tastings? Or do you think, once we get enough people back in the tasting room and back to normal, that those won't be as important anymore?
I think we'll continue doing some. As Matt says, hopefully as people right now are actual visitors that are coming, and we're by reservation entirely now, tend to be where people that are driving to us, mostly from LA. But once people start traveling and we start getting out of state visitors back again, we're going to keep, I think the silver linings have been pretty marked for us. Certainly we're going to keep the reservation system, which means less visitors in terms of our overall count. We find the experience is much better. And virtual tastings, we're going to continue doing some, maybe not at the level that we're doing it now. But we did learn a lot about what worked and what didn't work last year. And still virtual tastings are a great way to see people, even if it's on a screen.
Sure. Matt, you think the same thing? You're going to continue virtual tastings, but cut them back a little bit, or?
As long as there are interested parties, we'll keep doing it.
Well, that's great. Well, I look forward to following both of your wineries. I mean, you both make some amazing wine, and Pinot Noir being one of my favorite grape varietals. It's great that you guys have invested so much in that wine, that varietal. So I look forward to maybe stopping by and actually visiting in person at some point. But it's been great to be on here virtually. I think at this point we're going to do is I'm going to turn it back to Adam, and hopefully Adam's got some questions either from the audience or from himself that we can go through.
We do. We got a lot of great questions, and Curtis, you did a bang-up job, man. Thank you so much for moderating that, Matt and Jenny. It's been so interesting to listen to this over this period of time, and it's also, as you guys have seen, a more deliberate consumer in all the wineries going to appointment only. You're seeing a more just a definitive, thoughtful person who's coming in and a fan of yours. I think we're seeing that with the idea of these virtual tastings, whether they may be out of market or wherever they're choosing to watch you, they are a more thoughtful patron of your brand. And I think the virtual things are going to stick around, and I hope they do, because it's a great way to connect. Want to get to some questions. Michelle asked one here, and I'll ask Jenny first and then to Matt, because it is a great question. Does e-com look different for large and small wineries? And really, how can wineries strategize in this space? Want to see the relative importance of website, social, and retailer sites like Amazon, Albertsons, etc., driving sales. Jenny?
Oh gosh, now, so the question is really how I can't speak as a large winery. I can only speak as a small winery, but it's just a great way to tell your personal story and to continue the communications with your customers. As far as the big versus small, I don't think I can answer.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think you kind of have to answer to where your size is at. Matt, what do you think as far as the size that Presqu'île is at, to Michelle's question here, or Michaela's question, I'm sorry.
It goes back to best practices. And as long as you're sticking to those things, which are, having a functional website, having a smooth purchasing process, and consistent communication, then you will be as successful as possible.
To both also Jenny and Matt, Jenny, will you continue using e-tailers now that tasting rooms are open again?
Yes. Yes. There are some that we think are good partners, have reached audiences that we would not have reached prior. So, people like Wine Access, we will, continue to do that. And I think that's an important way for Foxen to reach a broader audience.
Matt?
We generally don't. So for us, it's either direct sales through the Tasting Room Wine Club or through our distribution network. And that's really just maybe, frankly, and honestly, because of a lack of effort on our side. But, we want to maximize our margin for direct to consumer sales. And we do that by selling direct through our tasting room.
Then let me spin Amanda's question to you, Matt. How do you plan to redirect and manage those DTC resources once visitors return on site? What will you keep the same, and what might you change a bit?
Well, I think because we've had to go to reservation only, we're able to manage our interactions with customers better. We have just an overall better experience here. We've been forced oddly enough, to have food. And so, it's a more tailored, elegant, hands-on experience, and we will not be going back to, just bellying up to the bar in any way, shape, or form. So we like what we've been forced to do. We think it offers a better experience for our customers and sort of a better interaction with us at Presqu'île and the wines. And so that's another silver lining, just a better overall experience for our customers because it's more managed,
Yeah. I think it's great to mention that when forced to bring food into the mix, you got one of the best chefs on the Central Coast. So
we got very lucky with that timing, having Julie on board for sure.
Yeah, Chef Julie Simon is really one of a kind. This question to both of you, Jenny, sharing, this is from Bob. You guys, he noted you guys are both sharing very interesting information on how you're growing e-commerce sales. Do you have dedicated analytics staff to helping identify maybe opportunities, measure results in real time, tweak strategy, or do you share these responsibility just among the staff?
We have an e-commerce person, but I have to say we're pretty low tech on the analytics. I watch overall numbers, but I'm not a numbers tech geek at all. But we can just see, I watch activity and engagement. But beyond that, it's very untechnical. We just look to see, as I say, what Matt, I think so eloquently said, that we were working on enhancing the experience, things that we already do well, we're doing better now. And that's a good thing.
That's a great thing. Matt, what do you think?
So our wine club manager is responsible for the e-commerce and email marketing campaigns that we do. And so his name's Brian Chewy. He's been with us for forever at this point, what feels like forever, and he does a great job. And so we lump that into the wine club job because I think it makes sense from a lot of different reasons for us. Mainly, he's already blasting out emails and communicating with the customers on a regular basis. And if they're not wine club members, then it's a good opportunity for Brian to upsell them. And so we don't have necessarily like a data analytics team, but Brian will go look at, the data from an email campaign or, social media and see the effectiveness of that and try to, modulate those efforts based on what we see from the results of those things.
Curtis, got a question for you. Wondering how Albertsons knows a shopper. You mentioned this in your discussion about maybe having a $150, in tasting night at home. How do you know a shopper is investing X amount on an in-home tasting? Any tips or maybe lessons for folks listening who want to do a better job in kind of dissecting different market segments?
Sure. So, we have a tremendous amount of data at Albertsons that we look at. So we have, you know, admittedly, as a large, very large company, we have the ability to look at things because of the data that we have. We use the coupons that we issue out. That's really the best way for us to understand, to relate the customer between, okay, what are they showing up for the tasting, and then did they, you know, buy the bottles of wine? And so we use those really as essentially the tracking device. We don't individually track any customers, but we, you know, overall see, okay, how successful was this according to those coupons. So we've seen a tremendous, it's like a building interest, right? Initially, the virtual tastings, we'd see 100 people at, and then 150. And this last virtual tasting, one we did in Southern California, we had 700 people show up to. So, you know, we're building that kind of attention. Some of it's word of mouth, people posting on Facebook that they went to this virtual tasting, and then utilizing all that data that we have to just continue to tell the customers we're doing the virtual tastings. So it's kind of like a loop upon itself that just grows bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's interesting you said that, because I've noticed just in the course of things since like about a year ago, I hosted my first virtual tasting for the company Activision. The folks who make like Call of Duty, was just for their employees. And now starting to do it more for wineries. And you're seeing numbers from like, you know, 10, 20, 30 to sometimes a winery will have on, you know, maybe 70, 80, 100 people. And there's always 2 people in that frame. So, you know, you can double that, all those eyes. June has a great question. Jenny, what has been the most effective way in growing your email database? And how are you finding new customers through that e-commerce and that digital realm?
Well, I have to say it's a lot easier now that our tasting room is back open. Because as Matt does at Presqu'île, we try to capture most or all of the people that come in terms of getting their contact information and making sure they're on our list. And then we have the data of what they purchase and that sort of thing. But certainly I think because of the success of virtual tastings, we'll continue to do those. And when we do them through our partners, via a retailer, you know, a brick and mortar retailer or an e-commerce, that again, those are reaching people that might not otherwise be customers. And we like to have packages, incentives for them to go directly to our website or come to the winery.
We got room for one final question. Matt, I will ask you. Philip asked a great question about balance that you provide in your messaging. How much of it is consumer content? How much of it might be sales offers? How do you kind of break down that pie into the content?
Yeah, that's a great question. Balance is key in everything, right? Everything we try to do from a marketing campaign needs to be tied to a call to action. I don't want to just send an email out and say, hey, how you guys doing? I want there to be something tied to it, but it needs to be in our voice. It needs to be, appropriate for the timing. And so any contact we have with the customer usually comes with a call to action, and it's just about making it feel effortless. And, that's different for everybody. But I think it's really for us like a gut feel thing more than anything else. And just being honest, open, forthright and direct. And I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Also, thank you to Jenny. FoxenVineyard.com is the website for Foxen to schedule an appointment, learn more about those folks. Matt Murphy, Presqu'île, great to see you again, my man. Presqu'îleWine.com, one of the hardest wineries to spell, but once you get it, it's easy. PRSQUILE wine.com. And Curtis, man, thanks for driving that ship. Fantastic job. Appreciate all of your time today with Central Coast Insights. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So we are going to get ready to take a 5-minute break. Coming up 11:15, we got our keynote. We have a lot more to do and to learn. I'm excited. This has been already, just in that first segment, already a lot of edifying information, stuff to take down. Coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about the bulk wine scene. So until then, we got 5 minutes. Go maybe perhaps return the email, refill that coffee, take a break, and we'll see you in 5. Thanks. Thanks for being here, Central Coast Insights. I'm your host today, Adam Montiel. Pleasure's mine. It's a beautiful day. I'm excited for our next session. We're going to get a chance to meet William Goebel, also Audra Cooper, both from Turrentine Brokerage. And we're going to talk about what's happening in the Central Coast bulk wine scene. Obviously, a grape glut leading up into the last harvest, but a light crop and some smoke issues kind of kept us in check. How has that changed availability? How has that changed prices? And what are the brokers seeing right now? Looking forward to meeting Audra and William. Guys, thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Adam, and appreciate Wine Business Monthly for having Audra and I back again. I think we were talking the other day, this is our 7th or 8th Central Coast Insights that we have done with you guys, and we're here with a shorter time frame, and we've got a lot of information, so we're going to try to get right to it as quickly as possible now. But before we start talking about where we are today in 2021, let's talk about 2020 briefly. We started the year very much in an oversupplied position. There was very little demand. The demand that was there was still California brand driven, and we'll mention this throughout the program today. Then COVID hits. We had the off-premise sale increase. Everybody was pantry filling. Again, a lot of those brands were California driven, very volume and value priced. And during the same time, we also had removals of vineyards. And as we kind of moved through the year, we had a lighter crop. Then we had smoke. A lot of information coming through in 2020. It was drinking from a fire hose, and we went from seeing buyers being more just-in-time focused because there was so much supply available for everybody, to then becoming very reactionary with the lighter crop and the smoke. That led to 2020, where people have been talking about being more proactive.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back with you today. 2021 is going to be an entirely different year than 2020. However, we will see some of those influencers from 2020 continue through 2021 and perhaps even over the next few years. The good news is supply is moderating towards shortage for most varietals, but not all throughout the state of California. Price is still driven in a big way by California brands at the say $12.99 and below. However, we see middle tier buyers and wineries really have a presence now, not only in the Central Coast, but as well as the North Coast and Northern Interior. And we see that presence strengthening, and those brands represent the $15 to $30 bottle programs, which is good news, particularly for the coastal regions. Off-premise will continue to be the driver of sales growth. Therefore, those will be the wineries who are coming in for the significant amount of our supply on the coastal areas, particularly the Central Coast. New this year, we do see some planting occur both on contract and also spec. And then proactive sourcing is something we have not seen for at least 3 to 4 years now, where we see wineries coming in early, buying early both for grapes and bulk wine, and really taking a strategic approach to how they source their overall supply needs for 2021 and beyond, meaning that they're doing multi-year deals and getting ahead of the market.
Now, before we jump into the bulk and the grape market, we wanted to reiterate where we see things right now currently with the Nielsen scan data on this slide. We have a heat map. This is covering varieties of Cab, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Red Blend, Sauvignon Blanc in those price ranges. And in green, you can see the level of increases. These do show very well on the off-premise side. This is Nielsen scan data, so it's covering these items. And these items also not only include our traditional 750 milliliter glass bottles, but cans, boxed wines. So we keep that in mind as we look at this. And there have been sweet points on price for all supply, grape and bulk wine related. And the big seven really control this space. We know this, we've been talking about e-commerce and DTC, how well those things have helped certain programs through. For this information here, it's really controlled by a select few. And a lot of it's California value price driven products.
When we look at tons crushed by region from 2020, and this is a good depiction of comparing the 2020 crop versus the 2019 crop, and then the net gain versus loss, as well as the equivalent gallons of that net gain or loss, and then the percent change from the previous year, as well as the how the 2020 compared to the 5-year average. And you'll note that it's all major growing regions, North Coast, Central Coast, Northern Interior, and Southern Interior. The main points in here are the take homes of the 5-year average, off double digits across the board with the exception of the Northern Interior. However, the Northern Interior was off 11% from the previous year. I want to make a distinction here that's very, very important, which is a short versus a light crop. Often we hear 2020 was a short crop, and that was not necessarily true. Short is in relation to demand. Light is in relation to the actual yield per acre. I'm going to call 2020 a light crop. Certainly there was smoke influence as well. However, the light crop itself, particularly from the heat that we had during August, September, and going into October, was more significant than the losses that we saw with smoke taint. So I think those are very important take homes today.
Now, when we transition into talking about the bulk wine market, this graph, many of you may be familiar with. This is bulk wine gallons that are listed through Turrentine Brokerage, broken up by region. They include all vintages, all varietals. This is, again, we're focusing on the green, which is our Central Coast region, and what a difference a year can make. Over a year ago, if you look to that black vertical line, we had about 22 million gallons, and there's probably more than that was listed. Again, this is serving as a barometer for us as an industry to see where supply is. We look at to the far right, we're about 11 million gallons. That's probably more true and accurate than, say, last year's numbers were because of the lack of demand. And so what a difference a year makes. Last year, we used the word pivot a lot. We pivoted in a different direction now with a shorter supply available, but that also have led to an active market early. So when we look at bulk by vintage, here in the dark or in the green to the right, that's our current vintage 2020 that's available for sale. We're starting the year with less older vintage gallons available than we have in years past. And that's a good thing, as the bulk wine market has always been to moderate the excess. Now we're starting with, again, we've seen this market shift from just in time to reactionary to now being proactive. So we're in a very active marketplace as it is, with the most interest on 2020 gallons because of the less supply of 19 and 18 vintage.
We're going to go ahead and move into the major varietals here, and we're going to kind of go through this rather quickly, so don't hesitate to ask us questions at the end if we haven't covered something or you need more clarification. Cabernet has been coming off of an excess over the last couple of years, specifically in the coastal region, North Coast and Central Coast for that matter. 2021 is going to prove to be a very pivotal year for the supply and the market overall. It will determine whether or not we continue into excess or if that supply is truly going to moderate and move into more of a short position. When you look at this slide, you'll see that this is recent tons crushed 2016 through 2020. 2020 represented in the reddish kind of maroon bar. Again, the take home here is the fact that the crop was light. It was one of the lightest crushes on record since 2015. 2015 was a little bit lighter due to some frost. When you look at the major growing regions, overall supply starting out in November, December for 2021 for grapes was equal to, if not slightly greater than what we saw in 2021, which were historical peaks of available supply. However, the market has begun in all areas. In particular, the Lodi Delta area is now nearly sold out, if not sold out entirely, barring it not being a larger crop. If there is, there will be some excesses that will easily be sucked up by demand. The Central Coast started out a little bit more sluggish than the North Coast and the Northern Interior. However, we have had a decent amount of activity starting in about mid-January through to today. That said, I would still put us in a slightly excess position, specifically for Southern Monterey County and Paso Robles Cabernet, due to the amount that's currently available, although we are down nearly half of the volume that we started with, which is great news. That said, though, the reason why we're still in excess is not every single vineyard is receiving offers and interest currently. And there is a specific value proposition that growers are having to meet with buyers, where price and quality must line up. Pricing may not exceed the perceived quality. In addition to that, there is a difference between younger and older vineyards as well. Younger to middle age is more sought after, particularly if they can get ripe somewhat early and not be getting ripe into the November timeframe. Those are the vineyards that are selling first and getting the most interest. When you look at the older vines, they are not receiving offers currently to any great extent, and if they are at the bottom of the market currently. Pricing ranges anywhere from $1,200 on the low all the way up to $3,500 depending upon the area of the Central Coast. William, I know that sometimes we diverge a little bit in regards to what's happening with grapes versus bulk wine. Where are you currently on bulk?
Yeah, bulk wine market right now, we've seen a big shift. When we look to the far left here on the vertical line, how much volume we had available in 2019 vintage. And there was a lot that didn't get harvested that year as well. That's important to note. So when we entered into the year, we still had more than what the market can bear. Into 2020. Now, when we shifted, really what drove the demand was later in the year, which is about typical for that 19 vintage to travel about 16 to 18 months from harvest. It was now in demand, but especially even more so given the fact that there was a little bit of a lighter crop. There was an increased demand due to pantry filling, and then also a little bit of threat of smoke exposure in the Central Coast. It was a grave thing up and down the coast as well, but even Paso Robles was to a degree was affected. Now we enter into the market, and this data was taken a couple weeks ago. We're even less than what you see to the far right. The market has been very hot, especially on Paso Robles. I know I always focus in on Paso, but that has really been the key driver for the Central Coast AVAs. So that continues to be a hot item. Even 2020, this is early on. We wouldn't typically be talking about 2020 vintage until, like I said, 16 to 18 months down the line. Now we're talking about trying to find the supply. We have the demand. We have the demand for Paso-driven products, DTC, private label, a lot of different programs that are pushing and pulling on Paso Robles Cabernet. And I will say this for other varieties as well as Cabernet, it is price centric. Most of the bulk wine that we have been doing throughout the state, and that's also including the North Coast, the interior, and to a degree, Napa and Sonoma, it's price focused around $15 or less per gallon. I know that sounds kind of crazy for Napa and Sonoma, but a lot of drivers there that are pushing on it. And as you can see in the red, we do have volume available for both Sonoma. Napa's a little bit tighter for the 19 vintage, but we do have 20 vintage available as well.
William, you hit on a really important point regarding Brand Paso. Brand Paso seems to be a pretty big focus right now for that $15 to $30 bottle, whether it be Cabernet or other red proprietary blends. One of the things I didn't note when we were talking about tons crushed was the difference between what we're seeing in the North Coast versus the Central Coast, specifically Paso. Paso actually jump-started earlier than even Lake and Mendocino County, which is exceptionally rare.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, the heat map right now, when I look at Cabernet as a varietal throughout our state, I put Paso as number one, is the one I'm getting the most calls about. That is a fantastic thing to see. And it's not just private label, but it's also branded products. So we continue to see the drive in the Central Coast, particularly for the Paso Robles brand. Now, as we move from Cabernet, we're moving into another important variety, Chardonnay. And Chardonnay is a huge variety in our state, let alone the Central Coast. It's a very important one. And Audrey, take it away as far as kind of what you've seen with the tons.
Sure. With Chardonnay, it's like any other variety with 2020. It was light. This was no different. And what's interesting about Chardonnay, 2020 versus 2021, we're in very similar supply positions where Chardonnay feels much more balanced. However, Chardonnay is such a large varietal in the state of California that when buyers look at Chardonnay, they're very strategic in regards to their timing. They're only going to get out early, in which we have seen some early activity from Monterey County as well as Santa Barbara County, but not to any great degree like we have some other varietals. And that's because a lot of the buyers are waiting to see what the crop looks like. One large crop, we're right back kind of past that balance point. A lighter crop certainly will push that more into a shortage point. But right now we're just pretty much teetering. The good news on Chardonnay, just like all the other varietals, is we see pricing above $1,000 per ton, all the way up to much higher pricing depending upon the sub AVA. And the reason why that is good news is in 2020 and even 2019, we saw a lot of sub 800 per ton deals happen for volume of Chardonnay. So we see this market overall even a bit healthier than we saw last year. And I think that's likely to continue, barring not having a large crop.
And the bulk wine market, not as drastic as what we saw in Cabernet, the decrease here. So we do have supply available, interior, coastal. It's acting more moderate and balanced, I suppose, for supply, and more moderate activity level for the demand side. So we still have options available up and down the coastal regions in California. And it comes to the Central Coast, we did have some activity early on for Chardonnay. It's a variety that we typically see throughout the marketplace up until maybe about June, July at the latest. We saw this start up in November, December, which was great to see. Quality focused on Chardonnay. The demand was, again, moderate still. And we have supply available if a buyer was to come into the market looking for it. Those prices had moderated from where we first saw them in November and December to now where we are today, kind of more into the 8, 9 on the low side to maybe a 12, 13 on the high side. So again, following suit with what we've seen across the board, not just in the Central Coast, but across the board for this excess inventory, the bulk wine, trading below that $15 price point because it's feeding into a category that continues to see growth and demand.
Well, let's talk about the behemoth right now on the market. Unfortunately, Pinot Noir is still in a point of access. It may not be as severe as we experienced in 2020 because we do see a bit of a heartbeat to the market, and it's a real actual rhythm to the market, but it is not a strong one by any stretch. When we look at tons crushed, it's a little bit deceiving because when you look at how light this crop was, and this was one that wasn't just yield per acre, it was also impacted by seasoning as well. You look at this and say there has to be quite a bit of demand for 2021, and that's not necessarily true because, William, I'll talk a little bit more about grapes with you in bulk, but why don't you talk a little bit about what happened in the fall of 2020 with previous vintage wines and how that stacked up with the shortage of 2020?
I'm gonna kill the word pivot in Adam's honor here, as he had mentioned before. This one pivoted in the wrong direction. As you can see, we did see a sharp decline in the fall, and that was predominantly for all the older vintage Pinot Noir that we had. There was 2018 and 19 vintage that was still not in a bottle yet at that point in time that found its way to the bulk wine market, and it sold quickly because of the smoke and the perception of the 2020 vintage on this variety. So it's important to note people pivoted pretty quickly away from 20 into 19, 18 to build up that inventory if they didn't already have long inventories at the time to kind of move themselves through that 20 vintage. Now, there was still plenty of 20 Pinot Noir that got made into bulk wine that still found a home in a program, depending on the circumstances of the quality and people's thresholds when it comes to smoke. We have an industry that's divided on where that threshold lies, what makes it, what doesn't. Things can get found into a blend, and it'll still make its way to the shelf. I mean, we still don't talk about 2017 as much in the North Coast, but now here we are into 2020. And so we have the supply of 2020 vintage Pinot Noir available. That's probably longer in the tooth than most varieties, I would say. This one's certainly still finding itself a difficult time to move through. And again, we don't want to hold on to the variety too long. Unless you have a desired home for it, long term, this is something that you most likely try to move out before the coming harvest. And that's the other thing about this variety. It's still relatively young. Let's not forget that Pinot Noir is not the oldest variety on the block. This thing really started taking off after 2008, 2009. Now we maybe perhaps reached a supply issue with Pinot Noir that maybe there is too much to move through. Think about how much 18 gallons came available just under a year ago. That stuff wasn't in a bottle. That had to come onto the bulk wine market, and this is the function of the bulk wine market, is to help move through the excess of Pinot Noir.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note here that we're not necessarily way overplanted on Pinot Noir. It won't take many removals to kind of put us back in a balanced position regarding acreage. What was really a function of the excess was the massive 2018 and 2019 crops. Mother Nature just gave us an abundance of Pinot Noir, and it hit at the wrong time. This one, I'm going to take your buzzword again on pivot. Certainly you're right, it has pivoted in the wrong direction. However, it will probably take 2021 and 2022 to pivot the opposite way, more towards balance or shortage. So a couple more years and we'll be probably talking about Pinot Noir differently. However, if Mother Nature gives us a large crop on this one over the next 2 years, we're likely to see this kind of continue to barely have a heartbeat to the market. When we look at red blenders, this is mainly Petite Syrah, Merlot, Zinfandel, Malbec. I'm missing one here. I think I said Petit Verdot, Petite Syrah. Really, the focus has been on Petite Syrah, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Syrah. The great news here, and I didn't personally see this coming to the degree that we're experiencing currently, we will likely be sold out of 2021 grapes in the Central Coast for Petite Syrah, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Syrah over the next 30 days. I don't think I've ever, since I've been here in 2012, seen these varietals sell out that early. And a lot of this is coming from the huge growth of off-premise proprietary red blend programs. That said, it is also coupled with the fact that we have seen some significant removals, not just in the Central Coast, but also the interior of Petite Syrah and a few of the other red blenders. So between all of that, we've got a market that has been somewhat hot, which is rare that I will characterize a market as hot, and a market that has been moving at a relatively fast pace. William, this is another one where we see kind of a divergence between grapes and bulk. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the biggest red for me in the Central Coast that's been the hottest item of the last few years, and I believe I mentioned it in this presentation in years past, has been Paso Robles Zinfandel. That continues to be a hot button. That one, as well as Petite Syrah. To a degree, we've got the Malbec, Cab Franc, Syrah. I would say Syrah probably leaning more towards an increased demand level right now. But all in all, outside of the 19 vintage, which has been cleaned up for the most part, we're now into 2020, and there is still demand for the red as well. The other important aspect I think that we've seen that's transitioned over the last few years is we've always talked about the competition, and the competition being from the interior or perhaps even the North Coast when it comes to the red blends, because people are cost averaging their blends. I've seen that a little less. That's still a factor, but this also leads me to believe and supports the fact that there are more programs dedicating themselves into the Central Coast, into Paso Robles, that are trading at a higher price point that allow them to take in some of the Central Coast. Whereas years before, we always talked about, well, hey, that's substitutable with the price from the interior. That's still, of course, a factor, but doesn't seem as big as a factor today.
I think it's also important to note, on the grape side anyway, that a lot of these red blenders are still very price sensitive. They're moving quickly. There's not a lot of them, but it is very easy to go a bridge too far in regards to sellers' expectation on price. So this is certainly one to be careful of. So that's going to wrap us up for the varietals. We're going to go ahead and move into what I am truly grateful for, which is leaving 2020 behind us. It was an exceptionally difficult market for everyone involved. Didn't matter if you were a seller or a buyer. It was very difficult. That said, we did have some really great bright points of 2020 that are starting to kind of bleed into 2021.
Yeah, let's just take it point by point, and we'll talk about the value brands. Again, that's something that we saw early on in 2020. Moving through into 2021, it's still an important focus. We're still focused on off-premise, as even on-premise starts to pick back up. We're talking about volume here, and we're talking about moving through our supply. So these continue to be some of the heavier movers that help get us to point number 3 of balancing inventories.
Yeah. Vineyard evolution will continue to play a major factor in the market, not only this year, but in the markets ahead of us. moving forward. We are seeing kind of the evolution of these new vineyards take place where more mechanization, different types of trellis systems, higher density, perhaps even higher yields are really starting to take root and dominate the market in a lot of ways in respects to supply. And so this is something that is both good from an economic standpoint for growers specifically, but can also be a little bit of a sketchy point, because we could have these vineyards that take us by surprise that are able to supply more than we anticipated. So we need to be very careful with these new plantings, where it pushes us in regards to excess versus shortage. When you look at the integrated approach that we're now seeing on sourcing, this is not necessarily new to the marketplace, but it is new to us in recent years. We see a lot of wineries, as I had mentioned early on in the presentation, take an early approach to the must-haves and then kind of slow down a little bit, and they're starting to wait to see what this crop looks like before they finish out their sourcing. Not only that, we have a lot of wineries who are both buyers and sellers of grapes and bulk wine. So they're trading and doing a lot of different types of activity on the marketplace in order to find their balance point, as well as be able to keep up with growth. Certainly the off-premise versus on-premise will continue to be a factor in 2021. I would love to say that we will see a full recovery and resurgence of on-premise in 2021, but that remains to be seen. And then price versus quality. We definitely see a divergence there a little bit between grapes and bulk. On the grape side, we still very much are quality dominated at the right price. William, what are you seeing on the bulk market?
Well, as mentioned before, we saw the shift from the buyers that had as much supply to look through and as much time as possible, that just-in-time inventory sourcing skill that they had, they now has been shifted to more price-focused. The supply has been taken up pretty quickly as far as availability of excess. So that allows less choice. So buyers have been not necessarily more quality focused, more price focused, but it's still an important barometer for a lot of these guys. But when it comes to those that waited long enough that, hey, we depended on what was going to be available on the bulk side, now we have no choice. We have to kind of jump at it as much as possible. So I have seen the shift, not just in the Central Coast, but other regions as well. And this kind of leans into also the economic uncertainty, because that can mean so many things. But most of these wineries have been very focused on protecting their margins. So that means their cost of goods, they're going out of AVA, they're looking for price relief, as we had seen price increases. But we are balancing everything out, so that is something that's coming to a little bit of phasing out, but it's still very much a focus.
Certainly. One thing I want to quickly say before you take us and close us out is, 2021, again, buzzword, is a pivotal year. There's no doubt about it. It can push us in one direction or the other in regards to the supply based on current demand levels. But I do want to say that this is certainly a different year this year as compared to last. However, with the amount of activity and bullishness that I'm starting to see, and even the planting that is starting to occur, I want to emphasize that we need to be very cautious in finding sustainability in the market. It is very easy to go a bridge too far in either direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everybody. I know that was a lot of information to take in a very short period of time. And Adam, if you've got any questions there that you'd like us to address, we have time for it if you'd like.
I just said thank you to both you, William and Audra, and I have no more drink left. So much pivoting. It's all gone. I do have some questions, so thank you both very much. Amanda asks, although there may be an oversupply, kind of going back to what you were talking about Cab Sauv in the Paso region, what would you say that there is an undersupply? Would you say that there's an undersupply of good quality Cab, disease-free fruit?
Sure. Yeah, we're verging on undersupply of that. We're not quite there yet. Certainly, there's, as I mentioned, the vineyard evolution has really taken root in Paso in a great way. And those are the vineyards that are sought after. So the younger, more middle-aged vineyards that can in fact get ripe was where we're seeing the majority of the demand currently. However, not all those grapes are currently sold out. Until they are prior to harvest, I can't really say that we're in a shortage yet.
What are you seeing as far as plant or replanting contracts, maybe length? Also talk to if there are particular nurseries and clones that are preferred.
Sure. Interestingly enough, this time around, with the plant cycle just starting again, I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of preference on clone and rootstock and trellis and so forth from wineries. They're actually a little bit more open-minded than I've seen them in the past. That said, certain winemakers have their favorite clones, and you certainly have to have that discussion with those winemakers as you're making your plans. What was the first part of the question, Adam?
Amanda was asking what you're seeing as far as plant or replanting contracts, length, things like that.
Planting length, as far as contracts, and this is interesting. You hear wineries talk, I'm going to contract long-term, whether that's current production or planting contracts for that matter. And long-term, in the grower's mind, means 10 plus years. In the winery's mind, depending upon whether it's current production or planting, that can mean 3 years or that can mean 7. When it comes to planting contracts in the last 3 months, I'm mostly seeing anywhere from a 5 production year to a 7 production year. There are some 10s out there as well, but what I'm noticing is there's a disparity between growers and buyers on how they're viewing pricing towards the end of those contracts. There are a lot of growers that are exceptionally concerned that say, let's just throw out a number, 1,700 today is not going to be 1,700 and economically the same in 10 years. So they're actually preferring to go a little bit shorter, which is the first time in my career that I've seen sellers want to go shorter on planting contracts.
Last chance to get in a question here. Joanne's got a great one, guys. Based on your experience, do you believe that this is the beginning of a new cycle with increased consumer demand over the next several years, or perhaps maybe a bounce or the return to a downturn due to oversupply?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, we were due for a change in the supply cycle and kind of begin that next phase. The lighter crop of 2020 exacerbated that and kind of sped the cycle up to some degree. I will throw out caution, and this is me individually saying this. This is not necessarily Turrentine as a whole saying this. I've noticed a big trend in the last decade where supply cycles are much shorter than they had been previously. Originally and historically, they were 7 to 14 years, typically 14. Now I'm seeing 3 to 5 year cycles, and that's because, for better or worse, the wine industry has gotten bigger, better, faster.
Yep. Audra Cooper, William Goebel, both from Turrentine Brokerage. You can learn more about Turrentine Brokerage. That's 2 R's, turrentinebrokerage.com. Thank you both for being here. Central Coast Insights.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
That was really, really interesting. We're going to give you a chance to take a few minutes. Coming up, I'm excited about our keynote. Andrew Nelson is a friend and a really edifying person to listen to. We're going to talk all about what a buyer wants. Acquisition, making yourself, how to make yourself look attractive for it, and then the flip side of it. If you are, maybe it's at the right time, and how to go about creating a situation and a scene where maybe you can make moves to do just that. So we'll do that in 5 minutes. You have time to reheat that coffee, maybe return an email or two, and we'll be back here with Central Coast Insights.
You wanna dance?
Welcome back to Central Coast Insights. My name is Adam Montiel. I'm thrilled for our keynote. It is time now. We're going to check in with my friend Andrew Nelson. He is from War Room Cellars. He is definitely a pleasure to be friends with, listen to, learn from. I remember one of my favorite stories with you and my co-host for the Cork Dorks was feeling under the weather, and I had this interview. I was super excited with Master Psalm Brian McClintock and Raj Parr.
Yeah.
And my first call was to Andrew Nelson to sit in for my co-host, and we had such a good time. I love being on the air with you and learning from you. So I'm excited to dig into this What a Buyer Wants keynote, talk about case studies on how each purchase that War Room has made has come about and where it's evolved from, maybe how War Room Cellars evaluates a potential purchase, and what wineries who want to position themselves to be ready to be acquired, what to do. So I'm excited, and keep in mind, if you have questions for Andrew throughout, get into that black box on the right-hand side, ask them, and I will gauge in real time our questions, and Andrew will kind of, he'll modify the time that he goes so we can try and get them all in, because Andrew is really really worthy brain to pick. So without further ado, cheers, my man. Good to see you, and go to it.
Hey, Adam. I do remember that we blind tasted them, and they were like, oh, God.
Again.
Of course we're going to blind taste you. So I'm really excited about this and humbled, and I've thought a lot about what I want to say. So thank you to Wine Business and Central Coast Insights, some great panelists so far. I've been YouTubing what makes a great keynote, and you're supposed to start with an audacious claim to really capture mind share. So here's my claim. There are way too many wine brands in the world. Do not start a wine brand unless you're the Dows. And if you're the Dows, I think Patrimony is going to work really well. If you're George and Daniel Dow, then go ahead and start a wine brand. But otherwise, to all the rest of us, don't start a wine brand, buy one. So that's kind of my audacious claim. And I figure I'd talk a little bit about me, just kind of like what makes me credible in talking about this. I'll talk about War Room. What is War Room? What's this company with this kind of violent sounding name? And then we'll do the case studies. There's basically 4 acquisitions that we've either done outright or been a part of through joint venture. I'm a big fan of joint ventures, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how we do the evaluations, and then I'm going to give some advice to sellers. And take everything I say with a big grain of salt. But I love this topic, and it's something I think a lot about. So me, I've always loved alcohol from a very young age. My brother and I started making beer very early. We got into a bunch of trouble. I studied ag business at Cal Poly and wine and vit, class of 2007. My first harvest was at Edna Valley with Harry Hansen and Josh Baker, a couple Central Coast Titans. I left Edna Valley, and then I was the night brewer at the Firestone Brewery, then went abroad and made Retsina in Greece. For those of you who aren't familiar with Retsina, it's the Sabatiano grape, kind of a more acidic Chardonnay, and you ferment it on pine sap. It's a very traditional Greek wine, and it kind of tastes like you poured some Listerine into your Chardonnay. It's very cultural. Came back, and then I worked for Four Vines for Christian TG, the master marketer. I hope he's watching. And I really got the wine marketing bug there. I remember his peasant bottle with the old silk screen of the peasant dumping the barrel down on himself. Temperance, like chastity, is its own punishment. And I just thought, oh, this is so cool. The marketing, and the wines were delicious, of course. Then I kind of got my first real job. I went up to Napa with Diageo, Chateau, and Estate Wines, who Diageo is no longer in the wine business, but came in right after the Rosenblum acquisition and was just fascinated by that. I was in the grower relations team, so buying and selling grapes, moved into vineyard management. Then I moved down to the Central Coast and partnered with a vineyard management company and a private equity company in Colorado that owned some vineyards and was trying to create brands off of these vineyards. And initially my focus was in production. That had been my background, but realized very quickly that we would go out of business unless we were selling. There was nothing to pay me. So I had a meeting with Kent Rosenblum in Alameda, and I love Kent. He told me, focus on the B markets, focus on small and mid-sized distributors, and stay out of the competitive markets. Really focus on markets where you can do some damage. Show distributors that the wines are going to sell on the packaging and the price point, and people are going to come back for the wine quality. No one's as excited about the wine quality as you are, and the distributors want to see how quickly this will sell. So focused on selling, on building distribution, and we grew quickly. 2,000 cases our first year, 7,000 second, 22,000 the third. This became Rabble Wine Company. We leased a big castle, and I had kind of a poor exit. I was fired along with most of my team. And for those of you guys that know me, it was a very dark period of time. I got really into Marcus Aurelius and drinking vermouth. It was a dark. My wife was very pregnant, and from that created War Room with two others. And our mantra at War Room initially was waging war against big wine, but we've gotten more positive, and our slogan is now all for wine, wine for all. So we're about building something rather than tearing it down. And so that's kind of my story. What is War Room? So we kind of have three focuses. The primary focus is in acquiring heritage brands and then focusing on what people love about that brand, really focusing down on that. And we have two or three. One real well-known one, Bonnie Doon, is our most well-known. And I'm just a huge fan of Randall and that brand. We'll talk in more detail about the acquisition. Lapis Luna, we're trying to inspire people to reach for the moon. Bonnie Doon, all roads lead to Rhone. And then we have another brand, a Paso Robles brand called the Big Red Monster. Slay it. Got the bottle here. Here it is. So Lapis Luna, Reach for the Moon, Bonnie Doon, I think most people are familiar with. Here it is. So that's kind of our main focus is in acquiring heritage brands and then repositioning them. We also have some emerging brands. If you've never heard of Bubble Butt, we make a rosé seltzer. It's delightful. This is kind of our big swing into wine seltzer. You can go to drinkbubblebutt.com and pick up some of that. It's pretty fantastic. And then we also do some licensing deals where we'll pay a brand outside of the wine company, outside of the wine business, a licensing fee so that we can make and sell wine. And our claim to fame, or our most successful, is the Hallmark Channel Wines Jingle and Joy Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc. We're a small team. There's 9 of us now. This is our 3rd year, so we're still a young company. We're big on joint ventures. So we have a joint venture with a company called Total Beverage Solution. They're an import company, and they're fantastic to work with. They have about 30 salespeople, and they're our sales and distribution team. We don't have an in-house sales team. And then we also have a joint venture with a company called Wines That Rock, and they bring licensing into the wine space. So I'm a big fan of joint ventures. So that's me and War Room. So let me kind of get into how we've acquired these brands and some detail. So initially, Lapis Luna was our first acquisition. Lapis Luna is a 20-year-old wine brand, and it had kind of hung around at about 3,000 cases a year. It was founded by Bruce Weiss, who's actually just right in the next room from me here, who was our controller at Rabble at the Castle, one of my cohorts. And so we acquired Lapis Luna primarily for the distribution network. It had maybe a couple dozen small and mid-sized distributors. This was the initial package, kind of classic. We're big on really evoking emotion. So we rebranded. Each label shows a faceless hero reaching for the moon. I'm trying to be real positive these days. And what was particularly attractive was its longevity. Usually, if there isn't somebody that just bleeds the brand, if there isn't a really strong brand champion, the brands tend to die relatively quickly. And Lapis Luna had existed for over 20 years. And at its heyday, it was with Chambers in California, one of our favorite distributors, and was up to 10,000 cases. So we acquired Lapis Luna. We relaunched it with new packaging, new price point, new sourcing, and we were kind of off to the races. our second acquisition was with Bonnie Doon, and Bonnie Doon was almost 3 years in the making. Just a little tangent on Bonnie Doon. I was contacted immediately after being unemployed. The interim GM at Bonnie Doon, Rick Flowerday, reached out and said, "Hey, I heard that you can raise some money and you could help sell some wine." Neither of which were particularly true. But he said, "Will you have a meeting with me?" And I said, "Of course. I love Bonnie Doon. I learned about Randall in college, and yeah, absolutely." So initially, I looked at Bonnie Doon as a job where I would go to work there, and as it evolved, Rick essentially said, "Look, why don't you just buy the brand? Why don't you put an offer forward and buy the brand?" And I don't have any money, although I will. But I thought, okay, that's particularly interesting. Let's try to put a group together and make an offer on Bonnie Doon. So we put a plan together, and we met with Randall and Rick in Oakland at the Fairmont. Just a really cool meeting, and nothing really came about. So we didn't make a deal. And it wasn't until almost 3 years later that we were able to make a deal with Randall. And the what's particularly attractive about Bonnie Doon is its legacy. It's such a special California brand, and it really has an emotional connection with lots of people, me included. But regularly, I'll hear people talk about how that was their wedding wine, or Randall got them into wine, and I was very similar to that. So it was attractive because there's such a rich legacy and history behind Bonnie Doon. What was one of the biggest challenges in the stewardship of Bonnie Doon? My goal is that Bonnie Doon lives on for another 100 years. What's a challenge is, how do you go from a brand with many SKUs and beloved for its diversity and unique SKUs, sparkling Pinot Meunier, which is fantastic, by the way, to this focused message within the distribution network? Because it's really important to be authentic in the rebrand. And I'll often use the Rosenblum scenario as an example of what not to do. And I'm a huge Kent fan, and Shauna, and I come from Diageo, so I think it's okay if I talk on this a little bit. But Diageo acquired Rosenblum, as many of you know, and one of the first things that was released was a rosé, a rose in bloom rosé, which really couldn't have been farther from what the base Rosenblum drinkers wanted. Rosenblum drinkers wanted, 15, 16%, rip your face off alcohol, big plum, brooding fruit. And so to release a Rosenblum rosé, it didn't resonate with this base. And so as we acquire brands and then reposition or relaunch them, that focus on what do customers love is really at the core of a lot of our decision making. Because it's one, I think it's just great stewardship in a legacy brand, but two, it's a good investment. You don't want to lose the customer base. So particularly with Bonnie Doon, a lot of our due diligence went into the sourcing, the vineyard contracts, and is there enough Cool Climate Grenache, and where can we find Picpoul? And what is Claret Blanche? There are some really unique grapes that Randall has turned people onto, and so making sure that was scalable was a big focus during our acquisition. Ultimately, we went to a platform of all roads lead to Rhone, so we focused in on 4 SKUs. With really defined messaging, kind of going back to the roots of Bonnie Doon and Randall, the Rhone Ranger, of course. And we did a slight packaging change on this, really wanted to be quite authentic. And this is the Van Gris. This is the best-selling rosé in Whole Foods at certain periods of time. But you can see we just brought a lot more focus to the brand Bonnie Doon Vineyard, and a little bit of color. So that stewardship is really important. Just in terms of like size, to give you guys an idea, when we bought Lapis Luna, it was about 3,000 cases. This year, we're on track. I think we'll do about 75,000 cases of Lapis, mostly independent retail. Bonnie Doon, however, was one of the most attractive things about Bonnie Doon was how strong it was in the on-premise. 3 months after the acquisition, we go into lockdown. So half the business was gone. It was terrifying. And so we did the pivot, 3-stack incentive nationwide. And we like real branded boxes. So the 4 SKUs were probably a little over 20,000 cases when we acquired, maybe closer to 25. And last year, despite the loss of all of the restaurants, we finished up a little over 30,000 cases. So, not great scale, but I'm really happy with the wine quality, particularly the wine quality. I think we've really helped continue with that style. And then, despite the loss of restaurants, we were able to capture quite a bit of new sales. So those are 2 that we've acquired outright. Then there are 2 that we've done through joint venture. And Adam, I know that I'm probably talking pretty quickly, but if there are questions, I can't see them. If you think something is relevant, go ahead and throw it in there. Guys, if you have a question, you don't necessarily need to wait till the end. I tend to ramble, and I can easily go a half hour. Which I think I'm about 20 minutes in so far. So 2 that we've done through joint venture. Did you have a thought, Adam, or I'll keep going? You're on mute. Okay, you're on mute, Adam. Yeah.
I was just, I think they brought me in because you had mentioned me, but I'm watching the questions. I'll have a couple, but no, feel free to continue.
Cool. So we have 2 brands through joint venture. One is called the Big Red Monster. And this was really the most blank canvas, I would say. This is a brand that was created in the early 2000s by William Grant and Sons, and then it was acquired by Total Beverage Solution. If you recall, that's one of our real key partnerships, a true JV, and the Total Beverage Solution has about 30 salespeople. So this is a trademark that they've had, and it had previously been a California non-vintage red blend. I believe that there was a Cabernet as well. And so we've essentially, War Room makes this for Total Beverage Solution. We're the production partner. And it's just a really fun brand. So we've proclaimed Paso. Through the due diligence on this, the thought was, what is a customer that's going to buy something called the Big Red Monster going to look for? Well, they're going to want it to be massive, right? Big alcohol, big fruit, big bottle. It's like an 800-gram bottle. And we thought Paso just really fit for kind of, this rugged brand. We like slogans, right? We've got Reach for the Moon, Greetings Earthlings, All Roads Lead to Rhone, and then Slay It on the Big Red Monster. So that's a joint venture. We just launched that last year with about 5,000 cases. I think we'll probably do maybe 15 this year. That's been doing well. It's a price point at about $18. And then just recently with Total Beverage Solution, we've acquired 3 brands from Deutsch and Precept. So those 3 are Skyfall, a Washington brand, EPA, the America's #1 premium sangria, and Ruta 22, an Argentinian Malbec that's made by Francois Lurton, a really great winemaker. So those 3, how did those come about? Well, it's kind of a unique story, but I will tell it. In the early days of Lapis Luna, we were real focused on this idea of a joint venture, and we had made it down the path relatively far with several, including with Deutsch. And I'm just a huge fan of the Deutsch brands, and particularly their model of joint venture, where they'll have a production partner that's really focused on quality and producing, and then they can be the sales and distribution partner for a small wine company or a growing wine company. I just think that's a really attractive model, so long as the margins are enough. But I think that can add a lot of value to each side. So we get to the finish line. Out of 30 brands, Lapis Luna is the one, and we're going to do this big deal. And then at the 11th hour, there's something called a hedonic test. And it basically is like, it's a formality. It tests how pleasing a label is. He had to Google hedonism. It's like pleasing to the senses. And Lapis Luna performed very poorly. It's like 9th percentile. You can believe that. Like, look at this. How inspirational are these? Reach for the moon. We're going to sell 70,000 cases this year. But alas, I get this email like, no way, we're not going through with the deal. But kept in contact, and ultimately 2.5 years later, that turned into a phone call where they have some brands that they're interested in selling. And interestingly, we're on the acquiring side. So we've acquired these with Total Beverage Solution, and same scenario as Big Red Monster, where War Room is the production partner. We handle all aspects of production, and then Total Beverage Solution is sales and distribution. So those are kind of the four. Next, I want to go into how do we evaluate a deal. And these are going to be specific to us. So I'm sure people may disagree with some aspects of this, but the one of the first things we look at is, can it scale? Is there something here that is growable? And the lens that I apply, that I've gotten a ton of flack for actually, is around 1 million cases. And I know that that's like a ridiculous number, but if you apply that lens, can this get to 1 million cases? It's really helpful in your decision making. Whether we actually get there or not, I think is there's a lot of luck involved, and not necessarily every wine brand needs to be 1 million cases. But from is this scalable? I think that's a really good lens. So scale is a big one. The other piece that we look at, you got bubble butt there. You got a bubble butt. Very nice. Yeah, nice can. The other thing that we really look at is SKU focus. We look at a lot of brands that are for sale, and sometimes it's very difficult to determine where is which wines are selling. There can be a ton of wines in the portfolio, and none are particularly selling more than the others. And from an acquisition standpoint, that's not particularly attractive. We really like to see some concentration of SKU focus, not necessarily half of the business or even 30, but something that's like, this is a flagship. This is this can be the I love that you're enjoying bubble butt, Adam.
I got some questions for you.
Oh,
no one
yeah.
touches my bubble butt. No one touches my bubble butt. It's good too.
Oh yeah, it's delicious.
And I remember talking to you years ago. I mean, probably 3 years ago. We were just, before you were even able to talk about it, and how much thoughtfulness and how much of a deliberate decision was. I mean, I remember going to your house and you were like, okay, I got this looking can, I got this looking label. I mean, every decision of this was so intense. I want to get to a few questions right here. One,
Sure.
You talk about scale.
How much more time do we have, by the way? Just so
We only got about 3. Maybe I can push it 4 minutes. So let's make this quick. And I got a few questions.
Well, let me just rattle. Do you mind if I just rattle off my advice really quickly?
Go.
I got just like 3 points.
Go.
One is, have your intellectual property really well in order. That tends to cause a ton of problems. Make sure you've got your trademarks in order. The second is, don't be afraid of joint venture. I think that there's a lot of really good opportunities if you've got a brand for sale and maybe you're a little nervous about that, to do a joint venture. And then the third is just I think this is a given, but just be really careful on your inventory. A lot of times we'll see an acquisition that's just rooted in oversupply of inventory. And so if you can have your inventory under control, that makes things real attractive. Go ahead, Adam. What do you got in terms of questions?
I want to get to all the questions, so we're going to have to be curt with the answers. But
Please.
one, a lot of wineries and brands are kind of scared of the idea of scalability. You thrive on it. It lights you up. What are some different ways to just kind of tweak that lens to get more excited about scalability, maybe be ready for it?
Be brave is the first thing. And, Mark Cuban has a quote, 10% of a watermelon is a lot bigger than 100% of a grape.
Good point. Audra asked a great question. What has been the biggest challenge so far facing War Room Cellars?
Oh, interesting, Audra. The stewardship of each brand is like really tricky. And we talk about that a lot. Each brand can present just a slew of potential issues if you're not authentic to what customers love. And so being able to identify that really quickly and lean into it and the least amount of missteps is possible. So I'd say really like identifying the heart and soul of the brand is particularly challenging.
Great question from Joel Peterson, Paso Wine. Do you think a wholesale brand driven off premise needs to have a DTC or tasting room presence in Paso wine country? How does that brand come to life beyond just the wine inside the bottle?
Oh, what a good question. We're disputing this internally right now as to whether we need to have a tasting room. So it's an on-premise. Just ask the question one more time, Adam. I just want to understand the brand.
Do you think a wholesale brand driven off-premise needs to have a DTC or tasting room presence in Paso? And how does that wine brand come to life beyond the wine, just in the packaging?
I mean, I'd say the short answer is no. And I can think of several examples of real strong on-premise brands that don't have a tasting room. But I think that I do think you can create a lot of emotion through your brand story, and there's plenty of opportunity to have that, to have the storytelling take place in the on-premise, and particularly as the on-premise is opening. Joel, I would say, lead the charge with your distributors. Have a plan in place so that as restaurants are opening, you're the most attractive for them to put into the bag and storytell. And I don't think you need a tasting room.
Finally, Michael asks, where are your wines made?
We do production, so we don't own a winery or a vineyard. We buy grapes, we do production contracts, we make all the Bonnie Doon wines are made at Monterey Wine Company in King City, who we love working with, and also Center of Effort. A shout out to Nathan. And then we work a lot with the Pollies up in Ukiah, Mendocino. We bottle at predominantly 3 different facilities, but we're a very low overhead model. Wanted to avoid leasing a castle ever again. And so, we're here in a log cabin, and we're a small team with low overhead, and we just pass that value on to our distributors and ultimately to the customer.
Andrew Nelson is from War Room Cellars. You can learn more about them, warroomcellars.com. I'd encourage you, if you ever have a chance to see him at an event, or what are events? What are those? But if you ever see him around, ask him, pick his brain. He's a great guy to talk to. And it's been a pleasure to see you, man. Drinking
really
bubble
great to see you. I hope this was helpful, guys. And if I didn't cover something or you want to debate me, feel free to email me directly. My email is all on the website. And order some bubble butt. And just thank you to Wine Business and Central Coast Insights. I'm really honored to be a part of this, and I hope I delivered some food for thought and great value to the people listening.
I love it. Thank you, Andrew. Again, warroomcellars.com. Always enjoy.
All for
time.
wine for all.
All for wine and wine for all. Always enjoy Andrew Nelson here. Coming up, we're going to take a quick, just 60, 90-second segment to get some things on the back end dialed in for our next panel, which I'm very excited about. Andrew mentioned, also Joel in his question talked about DTC. 2020 was a big year for direct-to-consumer relations. And what are the experts saying we can look into with the next year? We're going to come back and chat all about it in our final panel. Thank you for spending time with us here. Central Coast Insights. I'm your host, Adam Montiel. It's been a pleasure to be here. I can't believe we're already at the last panel. I'm kind of bummed. This has been a lot of fun. The momentum has been exciting. We will check in with managing editor of Wine Business Monthly, who I'm very grateful to have me here. We'll check in with Aaron Kirschenman at the end of this panel. It's my pleasure now to introduce some fantastic people. Look, we're talking about that direct-to-consumer relationship. It has been for ages that tightest relationship that a winery can have. And in 2020, we saw brands that shared and experienced and enjoyed that DTC relationship with their folks. Those brands really flourished in 2020. We saw a lot of really positive moves. It was a major channel for wineries of all sizes last year. So what do the trends show? What does the data show? We have Jude Radeski. He is the GM for Adelaida Vineyards, some heritage stuff in Paso. Looking forward to chatting with him as well as Carol Rounsonville, the GM of Denner Vineyards, also in Paso. Some fantastic stuff, and looking forward to meeting Jennifer Warrington. She is from Wise Academy, and all in the capable hands of our moderator for this panel, Andrew Adams. He is the editor of Wine Analytics Report. Folks, thanks for being here at Central Coast Insights. Andrew?
Thank you, Adam, for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As Adam said, I'm the editor of the Wine Analytics Report, which is published through Wines Vines Analytics, and that's the data group of Wine Business Monthly Wine Communications Group. So we're very happy you all could join us. I know I personally and the rest of our team wish we could be in hosting this in person. That would be great. But this is the next best thing, as we all know, after living through this past year. Thanks also to our sponsors who helped make this happen online last year and helped it go online again this year. So I'm going to start off with a brief look at the data because that's key to what we do in the data group, obviously. But we've been tracking DTC for some time through our partnership with Sovos Ship Compliant. And so I'm just going to start off here, and yeah, we're up significantly. It was clear heading into the end of February, maybe not so much February, that was still pre-pandemic. Right now, if you look at where we did in February, that's our most recent data, we're more than 300 million, that's 17% more than what we did in 2020. And that's, significant, but as I mentioned, February was a pre-pandemic month, and it actually is a bit of a down month compared to the rest of the year. Like in 2020, DTC was only 262 million, and that was about even with the previous year. We really started to see the effect the first week or the last week of March, and then the big increase in April came in April, and that was particularly in volume. And this is what we just did. Volume was up 23% to nearly 650,000 cases. That's 23% more than last year. And really, volume has led throughout the past year and leading to a high point, well, not the highest point, but a high point of April 2020 was 943,000 cases. That was the third highest total of the year, after actually October and November. And I thought it was really interesting just tracking this through a record-setting year is that we still followed kind of the same up and down curve, as you can see there, with 2020 being the first high point. And that was really from that initial surge. It was clear, as I said, last week of March and then going into April that the shift happened sudden and dramatically. On-premise shut down, but people still wanted to buy wine. And we saw that, in the DTC numbers almost right off the bat. So really impressive there. And then it's going to be interesting, though, in the next, over the next few weeks, to really track how this looks compared to last year as the market changes. I think there's a great deal of optimism that's tempered a little bit because of the risk for a third wave or fourth wave. But as on-premise opens back up, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in DTC and off-premise, and we have a close partnership with Nielsen. We actually do a whole separate report that really focuses on off-premise, complete off-premise with DTC and retail. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out compared to last year as we're in this abnormal surge, how that looks. And you just got to be sensitive to the fact that if sales decline, shipments decline, that may not necessarily reflect a change in consumer sentiment, just a change in consumer purchasing habits. So that's something to watch. And then just to dig a little bit deeper into the Central Coast, you can see here, now this is shipments. This is the 12-month total through February was more than 393 million. That was 21% over last year, or the previous 12 months in value. And volume came to more than 940,000, which was 18% up over last year. The Central Coast is third total value after Napa, Sonoma. You know, I mean, Napa is in a league of its own by a wide margin and still in a very strong position. But really notable about the Central Coast is the average bottle price. Now, this is the average bottle price across the shipment, and this is held steady for the Central Coast. I mean, it's even 3% up over last year. And that's really remarkable, particularly when you look at other regions. Napa and Sonoma were both down in the average bottle price by about 10%. So not only has the Central Coast done well in value and volume like every other major region, they were actually able to increase the average bottle price. And then just we segmented this down by price point further, and it was interesting to see at the very low end, at less than $8 average bottle price, that was up by more than 100%, and then 200 plus was up 3 times. But really, most value and volume were in those mid tiers, and you know that again is a testament to holding the line on average bottle price, and also shows the influence of medium-sized wineries in terms of annual production. These are making less than 500,000, more than 50,000, if I remember correctly, how we categorize them. And these wineries are the backbone of the Central Coast in terms of total production and also in shipments. I think in production, I might have misspoke. You know, I think it's similar across the state and that the few largest have the biggest share, but in terms of number of wineries, definitely they are the backbone. So that's kind of our high-level DTC data. We also wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper using some of the findings by Community Benchmark. And if you don't know them, interesting company, they take anonymous aggregated DTC revenue data, and then so you as a winery can then share, you can then open up your books and look how you compare to your neighbors, and also wineries in other key regions. You know, I think they've got a lot of clients in Sonoma Valley, Walla Walla, elsewhere. So I'm just going to jump into what they have. And you can see it was a different story for the Central Coast, as you all experienced. And key to that was tasting rooms. And this is just revenue. And the Central Coast is different from the rest of the state in that there's a less of a dependence on wine club shipments. And so just talking with Community Benchmark, this dip you see here in August and then a spike in September, that reflects an adjustment of when those shipments went out. But you can see 2020 total DTC revenue, Central Coast, significantly better and in positive territory than compared to all of Community Benchmark's client base. And then here, I think this is to me at least, this is the real story. You can see the average year-to-year visitation, and Central Coast really enjoyed a higher level of visits, traffic than the rest of the state or the rest of Community Benchmark's client base. And I think that's, you know, you lucked out, and I think the COVID situation was relatively better in the Central Coast, and it's a great destination for a road trip from, you know, LA and even the Bay Area, but you guys know all that. And then you can just see, you know, again, how the Central Coast did a little bit better across the board than the rest of the state. And then here's further digging into revenue split by channel, just that much stronger tasting room revenue, even events was stronger. And then again, also just to note the less of a dependence on wine club shipments. So, and then this is key too. This is revenue, tasting room sales by month. And you can see, you know, a little bit better during the quietest months of the initial lockdown. And then of course, October really stands out. And, you know, when I think back on October, from my point of view here in Napa County, that was a pretty bleak month for us. So relatively stronger than, of course, for Central Coast for folks looking to get to wine country. So that is a quick look at the data. And then thanks for your time and attention. And if you want some more information, you can check us out at Wine Finds Analytics. We got some data up there, insights from our database. And then really, if you want to dig deep into 2020 and a record year of DTC shipments, there really is no better resource for a better price, which is still absolutely free, than our annual DTC report. You can download that at the link there, and then check out Community Benchmark 2. They're doing some pretty interesting stuff, as I mentioned. So that's kind of the high look at the data, but I want to keep moving along in the interest of time and get to the real experts and get into the panel discussion. So thank you, everyone. I just thought maybe to start us off, a look back onto 2020 relatively briefly, and maybe if each of you could share with the audience something that really worked in DTC and kind of the metrics you use to gauge that success. And Jen, you know, a key reason why you're joining us today is you met, my understanding is you met with hundreds of DTC staff from wineries across the country, and you've got a lot of insights from how they managed the past year. So Carol, maybe you want to start us off?
Forgot about the mute. Yeah, we did use a data analytics company when pre-pandemic. We were interested in seeing what kind of projects they could do for us, and we were very interested in working with them and on some certain specific projects that we were looking at. One of them was reacquisition of what Jen calls alumni or club members. Club members that had left our club, and so they actually did a couple campaigns for us where we worked with them on our data. They provided us with lists of people who were probably more likely to rejoin the club, and then we developed emphasis on whether these people were interested in visitation of the winery. Was that most important to them, or was it the wine itself and the club and the discounts? And excuse me, and we sent that mailer out in 2 different formats. We sent it out in email and we sent it out on postcards. And then we watched what happened with that campaign, and we were really, really impressed with the amount of signups we got, as well as sales. We got some sales out of it. The second project that we worked with Mather was actually was during the pandemic, and one of the things we were concerned about is whether people would be interested in quitting the club. You know, if their financial situation had changed. And so Mather had done an analytics on who would be most likely to quit the club. And we sent out another campaign with a postcard and email with a direct message from Ron Dinner saying, you know, he really appreciated the club. He missed seeing people at the winery. And we tracked the cancellation rate of those groups, and we didn't see hardly any at all. So we were very impressed with that. The third project we worked with Mather was our pricing and our bottle pricing. They had done an analysis of our wines and which ones would weather a price increase and made some suggestions. We actually are holding off on that just because with the pandemic, we're just not sure what's going to happen, and we just want to make sure that we're providing the most accessibility to our wines. So we didn't do much of that with their pricing yet, but we plan on doing it once the pandemic has kind of slowed down. I think for us, we just felt good having, I don't know how to put, maybe professional analytics done. We're a flat organization, and we didn't have the staff to do it here. And it was really nice to have somebody who would kind of focus down on the certain contacts that we had, so that we weren't emailing everybody and just doing a wide net and possibly getting some of that email fatigue that you might see these days. So that was one of the things that we did that we felt that was very positive and had some good results.
Hear that. And then, Jude, I understand that, you know, of other wineries, you saw a lot of success with email offers and business. But as we discussed, I think some of those offers were surprising to you and the success and resonance they seem to have with consumers.
Yeah, we decided, I don't want to use the P word by any means because all the other previous presentations went hard on that, but we did go heavy and we depended on a lot of email campaigns, and we tried to mix them up as much as we could. So not everyone was a hard sales pitch. And more importantly, we had real great success with the whole one-click offer phenomenon. So instead of just offering a bunch of different wines or offering a flat discount rate or whatever, we put together sort of pre-picked packages of wines. And those were just immensely successful for us, not only in terms of customer uptake, but also in introducing sort of some different wines to people. Allowed us to keep the average order values a little higher because it wasn't, it wasn't the bulk of the folks coming on weren't just buying 6 of your lowest price SKU or anything like that. So we did a lot of different targeted sort of theme-based things. We did a white pack, we did a Rhone style package, we did a selection of Cabernets, we did specific vineyard themed approaches. So we took a lot of different approaches on that. We did increase frequency of email lists. And contrary to one of the things in your data, we are actually heavily club dependent. We're a relatively small producer, not one of the larger ones down here, certainly one of the older producers down here, but not large. So we did kind of lean into the club list and spend a lot of time trying to work those relationships as best we could, including sending out free gifts to some of those members. And we've never been one for sending out tchotchkes and whatnot.
In terms of club members and then leaning into that, were you able to do any analysis that led you to or draw on data that helped direct that strategy? Whereas, there's a subset, or maybe you knew certain members had purchased this, so then you have a better seeing click through on a certain offer, or was it more just putting out emails and kind of seeing what worked and then reacting to that?
So we did a little bit of both. Some of them were just putting out. I think one of the previous panelists said throwing spaghetti at a wall, and so we certainly tried some of that approach. But we did also some targeted campaigns. I'm not a fan of telemarketing, but we certainly tried it because, frankly, we tried everything last year. Jen's giving me the thumbs up there. I'm not a big fan, but I had to try it. We took a WISE course for that and then launched on it. And in that case, we did look at buying history of particular customers, and we focused on library wines offered specifically, say, to somebody who bought a lot of Pinot or a lot of Zin, making very targeted library offerings to them. So unlike Carol, I didn't have the budget this year to hire a Mather or anybody else, but I actually am taking a look at them, though, because I'm really intrigued by what Carol was telling me about that. I thank God I have a couple folks on staff. I have one person that's dedicated to e-com. He does our website, and he's been dedicated to e-com year-round anyway. So he's very capable of doing analysis, and then I've got our club manager is extremely good with crunching data. So we did sort of the more homegrown version, but yeah, we targeted as best possible and just used our historical purchase data as our best resource there.
Very good. Now, Jen, obviously you're a fan of marketing. What else do you think, or what else do you know works this past year that was a little different and maybe might need to stick around in the years to come?
Yes, thank you. We did a bunch of roundtables across the U.S. in 2020 in 15 different wine regions, about 300 winery folks. So we learned a lot of lessons, but the 3 that I think that are most applicable to the Central Coast are, 1, guests. Our customers really want to hear from wineries. There's an internal bias that says people don't want to get calls, they don't want to virtually meet, but our customers love wine, funny thing, and they want to hear about wine and lifestyle. So why not meet our customers where they are? the pandemic was a litmus test. We know that not only do our customers want to hear from us via phone or Zoom, they're willing to buy wine that way too. And as we saw with community benchmarks, there's a lot of opportunity in the Central Coast to do more with phone sales and getting sales beyond the club shipments with club members, and phone and virtual experiences are a natural way to increase those sales. The second thing is utility players are the new norm. Those wineries who were most successful in 2020 with generating revenue were able to cross-train staff. So they were more nimble, better able to meet the challenge of gaining revenue, and even when the tasting rooms were closed or there was limited capacity. And I think that the utility players are going to be the new normal for the direct-to-consumer staff in the wineries that are going to continue to do well. And the third point is reservations are here to stay. As Matt Murphy mentioned this morning in the e-com session, wineries are seeing higher average order value with the move to reservation only, whether they were forced to or not. Most wineries are planning not to go back to belly up to the bar model and staying with reservation. So again, that litmus test of what we already knew, less guests, more staff interaction means better experience, and the results in higher average order size and club signups.
You mentioned, utility players and changes there, and I'm curious, Carol and Jude, what you may have done in terms of staff training changes or compensation, and also maybe even technology or any tools that you might have invested in to kind of facilitate some of the new digital outreach wineries have had to adopt, and maybe still. So I don't know which one of you would like to start with that.
I can start. We did get some video equipment. We were doing a lot of videos, and we needed the microphones, the infrastructure to be able to do those things. You just didn't have them before. And so that was our main, that's about as far as we went for the infrastructure for videos and buying things. As far as the staffing, it was really interesting to see which employees were really could move from one area to the next and be comfortable with it. Those people really floated to the top, and we just started a bonus program that allowed us to really empower them to really take those tasks on. And for those who were interested, they got the opportunity. People who weren't interested, we can certainly see that it may not be their shtick, and so that was okay too.
I think I was somewhat blessed with a really diverse staff. Whether it was by design or not, I'm not entirely certain. We've actually hired a lot of people who had no prior wine industry experience. Our tasting room manager actually comes from a restaurant background. Our club manager, although he has certainly worked in tasting rooms as well, he fits that Swiss Army knife profile that you guys mentioned. He's a compliance specialist as well. So that was certainly important. But having people with some really different backgrounds really made things easier. I agree with Carol. Some folks were much better suited to getting on a virtual tasting or a video than others. Some completely begged away from it, but they found their own niche in some of the other things we did. And let's say, while we were closed, we took the opportunity to completely reinvent our tasting room model, not just the reservation only piece, but we did away with the stand-up, belly up to the bar tastings. Our tasting room manager went so far as to even change how we pour wine. We now deliver a pre-poured flight of wines in small carafes, almost like a bistro-style approach to the table, and we let people pour their own wine into their glasses now. I thought that was just a pandemic thing that we would use during the limited closures. I don't see us going back to it. We get universally good feedback on that, so it was an unexpected benefit.
So one thing I'm looking at is, and as the year unfolds, is going to be the on-premise data. We look at that, we get that from Nielsen CGA and DW166, and right now we've been about 50% down. What you all might keep an eye on to try and assess how to get out of this pandemic. And I mention that also because we're turning the corner into what would have been event season, right? And so I just data by Civic Science. They do really good stuff. I'm working with the Wine Market Council on surveys, but I think openness or willingness to go to a public event was at like 19% back in January. That's crept up to 20, 25, I think. And so there's a growing sentiment. And, you know, you look at the willingness to go out to eat, it's also been up too. So, you know, kind of really long-winded question, I'm sorry, but I'm curious what, you know, data or reservations or sales, how you're kind of tracking this year and what your thoughts are through the rest of it.
Well, I'll start with it's difficult to really look at events, especially with the term impending doom from the CDC yesterday. So I mean, you know, once you start thinking, oh, we can do this, maybe we can get started again, and then you get that one, you know. It does feel like to go out with events, it feels a little early for us. We do have a couple things scheduled, like some birthday celebrations with people who are celebrating with their families and maybe renting some spot out at the winery. But I'm just not sure we can pull off an event for 2021.
We are staying somewhat conservative as well. We haven't scheduled any large-scale events, but I am getting a little antsy about not having some club member appreciation events because, frankly, club member loyalty is what did it for us this year. Attrition rates were down, average order values and just total purchases for club members were tremendously up. So we saw incredible loyalty there. But like Carol, I'm sort of shying away from any group events. Adam, to your point, though, it's strange. Even though we hear all these national statistics about an unwillingness to go to group things, we're actually, one of the biggest challenges we're having with reservations right now is the number of people who call in looking for reservations for parties of 15 and more. We're limiting group size to 6 right now, and that has been virtually impossible. People will find ways to book multiple, smaller reservations and then come in and demand that they be all seated next to one another so they can effectively work a way around those limits. So, as I say, whereas the data shows one thing, in this case, the anecdotal evidence is very different for us.
Yeah, we're actually hearing a lot of wineries talking about it's almost like COVID 3.0 with the whole mask versus vaccination and how people are coming to terms with that and how it's showing up as guests misbehaving or not misbehaving. But again, we're also seeing that if you put together a policy or a plan for your winery and stick to your guns in terms of you're not going to do events past 20 people or whatever it is that works for your brand, and say, based on your business plan, based on what you want to do as a business, that this is what you're doing, whether or not the county or the state or whatever says you can have 500 or whatever it ends up being, that you decide what you're going to do as a business, as a brand, and roll it out that way.
Consistency, that helps your staff, it helps your brand, and it helps the consumer too. Excellent.
Right. Communicate.
Great. I just wanted to say, we really would love to get your questions. So I was just going to check in with Adam, see if we have any questions already, so. Sorry,
Adam.
Guilty of it again. Guilty of it again. It's like the biggest Zoom faux pas, right? Of 2020. You're on mute. What a fascinating time to listen to the four of you. And really more than maintaining that connection, but building and celebrating that relationship. I loved what Carol was talking about, IDing those people who would be more likely towards attrition, and then having Ron Denner reach out and say, hey, da-da-da-da. I've noticed one thing in this time as I've hosted more of these virtual things for wineries, whether it's on a corporate level or towards their wine club, that connection to the winemaker is so important. And if you're lucky enough to have a winemaker who, one, enjoys it, not all of them them do, but two are good in front of people, love that connection with people. Folks treat a winemaker, it's like a celebrity to them. And it's like when I just did one for Epic Estate Wines, and I remember going to events with Jordan, people will wait in line to take a picture with her, and she's just so sweet and so genuine about it. But then also with these virtuals, Jordan might not be the best at fielding questions on one screen and doing this and the other. Jordan should just be the star and be the winemaker and talk to the folks who want to understand and kind of pick her brain and learn from her. So I think that's kind of one cool way where I've been able to kind of mitigate and be that bridge, and Jordan can be herself, and then you can have someone like in this context just kind of drive that bus along. But folks and that connection to the winemaker, so important. I do got a few more questions here. Michelle says, how do you think the DTC numbers should be understood in the larger context of the overall performance of wine as a product category? For anyone who wants to jump in.
I'll take that one on, and I think DTC segment of wine has grown incredibly in importance. It still, though, represents about 10% of the off-premise, so it's small. But and it's a lot of growth, so it's good to keep that in mind. But I think the growth trajectory is really positive. So you don't hear that from we heard a lot about e-commerce this morning, a lot of growth potential there, and I think wineries learned and thrived with DTC over the past year, and so that's going to abate by very much. And the consumer learned too, so. Everyone I know who's not in the wine industry, I'm talking like friends and family who live across the United States, they're all buying wine online now, and that was prior to 2020. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, earlier this morning, and we heard a lot about analytics in this panel, Bob asked, Carol, you mentioned an analytics outfit that you use to kind of measure these. He asked, can you name the name of that analytics company that you're using there at dinner?
Yeah. Their name is Mather Economics. They're out of Atlanta. And they work with subscription-based companies. So, companies, and we are subscription-based with the club. So that they do understand that part of it. And then they have a complete, background of data on demographics for your area, the people in your club, the whole bit. So they have a lot more information than we do about our club members that helps us determine the best path to take with communicating with them.
Sometimes depending on the size of the brand, we could be wearing a lot of different hats, under the umbrella. If starting a club, Philip asks a great question here. What are the top 3 recommendations for must-have staff, including sales, website, customer service? Maybe Jude, I'll let you chime in first, and we'll get Jen and Carol to bounce off on this one.
So we actually it was by coincidence, we had actually beefed up our club staff a little bit. Right before the pandemic. We'd historically just had one person running our club. And again, we've been around, this is our 40th year. So we've been around for quite some time and had a fairly extensive club list. But we expanded that department too, just to provide a little more opportunity to have someone who could actually spend the time studying the data and whatnot, and to try to be a little bit more responsive in there. So to me, the resources we spend on club are just absolutely critical. I mean, because that's really an annuity stream as far as I'm concerned. That's ongoing sales. I mean, bless our tasting room folks. They're great. They do so much. But I think club has always been key. And then this year was the year we were able to unlock the whole e-com puzzle a little bit. Because for us, it had been low single digits percentage of our business. And we have someone now who does nothing but that. Historically, we had a real strong person in that role, but that person also wore a bunch of other hats and couldn't concentrate on it. Especially, I think someone mentioned it earlier, the follow-up. Looking at open rates on emails, sending out follow-ups to non-openers. There's somebody to take the time to do that. So to me, it's club and e-com have been key. I mean, your tasting room is always going to be an important part of the business, but And those people are just invaluable and frankly hard to find these days. But in terms of weathering, last year, and I think trying to maintain that momentum, the tasting room, I mean, it's a finite resource. I can only accommodate so many guests, and the new model of appointment only and no standing tastings is going to further limit that. So I think these other DTC resources, I think, are most critical.
Jennifer, your thoughts on some of these must-have staff if you want to really start dialing in, starting that club?
For club, I would agree with Jude. It's a lot about they're your biggest source of revenue coming in. It's how you pay for your grapes, or it's how you pay for your staff. It's really the most important thing. So definitely. I also think that virtual experiences are here to stay. So if you can have, those utility players that can do multiple things, you're going to be in a much better position in the future, as well as doing virtual experiences for your club members to make it part of like the benefits that they have. I think that's another part of it too, is figuring out what's going to make you have the strongest club that you can, and really lean into that.
Yeah, good thoughts, Jen. Carol, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Jude and Jen on the club manager, excuse me, the club manager. But the one area that I found we really experienced was needing logistics management with all the shipping. I mean, you really want somebody who can really walk those shipments through if they've gotten stopped or they've gotten lost in the system. And people want immediate conversation about it when they order wine. And so we really lucked out. Our wine club manager had this hidden talent of logistics management, and she does a fantastic job. We will probably have to split those up at some point because there's just so much shipping versus, pre-pandemic that we'll need the position.
Jen, let me ask you, Michaela asked a great question. For wineries which are not extremely data-driven yet, what is a good starting point of kind of cleaning up data for that sales team to really use effectively?
That's a great question. Always remember garbage in, garbage out. So if you can clean it and use it, that's your best bet. Always be thinking about your common denominator, which is the guests that are coming in the door. How many people you're seeing, those conversion rates. How many are you're converting to sales to wine club? There's some easy metrics that you would want to start with, and the triple score, the conversion to wine, the conversion to club, and the conversion to mailing list. So your top three, along with your traffic.
Good answer. Jen Warrington from the Wise Academy. You can learn more. I believe it is wineindusтрysaleseducation.com.
That's it. You nailed it.
Awesome. Jude Radeski, GM for Adelaida Cellars, adelaida.com. Carol Rounsonville, you could check out Denner Vineyards at dennervineyards.com. Andrew Adams, fantastic job in wrangling these folks. Really a pleasure to speak with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Wow, that was a great education on DTC. So important right now. I want to thank you for being and hanging out here with Central Coast Insights. Again, my name is Adam Montiel. I want to thank, before we bring on Aaron and Eric, for having me from Wine Business Monthly. Of course, everybody behind the scenes from a technical standpoint for making this happen, and our great moderators and panelists who really did a fine job today. I know we're still in this virtual thing, but like we've talked about, this is going to be here for a long time. And you talk about that DTC connection and that relationship, wine tasting by appointment, here to stay. We're seeing it better for the winery and better for even the customer. So this was a really edifying chat. For more on myself, I host a podcast called Where Wine Takes You. It's through Paso Wine. You can check it out anywhere you get your podcasts. It's in your podcast app on your smartphone, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher. It's everywhere. Where Wine Takes You. And then, of course, if you're ever cruising around on the Central Coast, the Crush 92.5 and the show The Cork Dorks. I have really, really enjoyed being here with Central Coast Insights. It's my pleasure to bring on the managing editor for Wine Business Monthly. Aaron, it is great to see you. Been having fun?
Good to see you too, Adam. I have been having a blast. I particularly enjoyed your pivot game. I am caffeinated and energized and so happy to wrap up this morning. Thank you so much, Adam, for all you've done to help bring the Central Coast Insights Conference to life.
Thank you very much for having me, and we'll definitely be back. And I learned a ton today. I really did.
Yeah, we have definitely learned a lot today. But before we wrap and take the time to sort of soak up all that great information about e-commerce, direct-to-consumer, mergers and acquisitions, and that bulk wine market, I just wanted to say a giant thank you. Thank you to our wonderful speakers this morning, to our advisory board for helping to shape the topics and field all of our questions, to our sponsors who have made moving to this videocast possible, and to O'Donnell Lane and North Bay Live for helping us bring this conference to life. In the next couple of days, you're going to receive an email with a link to our short survey. Please take just a few minutes to let us know what you thought about the conference, our speakers, our topics. And by doing this, you're really helping us continue to improve for next year. And hopefully we can meet next time in person. You're also going to receive a link to a replay of our conference sessions. Feel free to revisit these speakers and these topics at any time. And lastly, don't forget to mark your calendars for the 2022 version of YVI Central Coast, the largest wine industry trade show and conference south of San Francisco, and Central Coast Insights. We're coming to you live and in person at the Paso Robles Event Center, March 29th to the 30th, 2022. From everyone at Wine Business Monthly, thank you for being with us this morning. We hope to see you next year.
wanna dance?